tell me, in your opinion, the types of consequences that the medical community is facing with regard to a data breach or a security breach in spite of HIPAA?
Consequences. The consequences is what we can't control. Somebody trying to hack into a system, somebody trying to steal data servers, someone attempting to perpetuate identity fraud, to gain access to expensive services or prescriptions to drugs that they can turn around and resell on the street. We can't control all of the processes in which data gets moved, and so the exposure from a human element is far greater. And as we become more involved in the technological aspects of moving data, such as because of HIPAA and high tech, and privacy, and electronic medical records and all of those things, the operability of that and the exposure to that is going to get greater.
So what can the medical community be aware of? Are there any advice that you could give us in this video that would help the medical community and business owners avoid being in that type of a situation?
It's one thing to have processes in place and have people follow those processes, and many of them are pretty good. It's another to recognize the humanity of it all. Most data breaches happen because we don't think like thieves. All we know is that we're attempting to do a job, get it done, and pass it on to the next person without any forethought where information comes before, where information goes after. And even if we're, trained on security and privacy, the day-to-day reality of that from a human perspective leaves us all exposed to things that we have no control over. We have no control over the person who's going to pass by and use an iPhone to take a snapshot of an electronic medical record on a cart in a hospital. We have no control over the cleaning crew who has a thief they didn't check out in, when they hired this person, surveilling our offices and finding an opportunity to take our data servers. We have no control over the hacker who can get into a insurance carrier and steal millions of information, both protected health as well as identity. We don't have control over those things, but those things are real. They're happening every day, and we're not really equipped to handle them or protect ourselves from them. The only thing we can do is keep aware, continually learn, and recognize what we do every day that could potentially put us into a position of exposure. Ultimately, data breaches happen because of lack of understanding or lack of care, or both, and in most cases it's not deliberate, but the opportunity is still greater than our ability to manage it.
So what's the first step for a medical practice to ensure that this is not going to happen to them?
Most of the medical practices and health institutions are following, at least from their perspective, they are following the HIPAA regulations, which is 5 basic steps. And if you go to most practices and medical institutions, you will see evidence of that. But I sometimes feel that the reality of following it and actually living it are not always the same. There is misinformation going on. For example, the need to take a Social Security number is not always necessary in most cases anymore, but yet the debate over that in many different health organizations is still very much alive. Some say, yes, you do, and you have to, and others say, no, you don't. Where except for, people who are on Medicare and people in the armed forces, Social Security numbers are really not required anymore. So even as simple as better education, understanding that your organization's daily way of doing things from a human perspective will not always be great. It's the soft skills that I think I'm pointing to.
Right.
The knowledge and the soft skills about what people do every day in the attempt to do their job and do it well. and the various different circumstances that they find themselves in, that, processes don't always address and cannot address. So it is those soft skills that leave us vulnerable to attacks in so many ways, not just from an electronic standpoint, but from a human standpoint, where things do happen, and they're going to happen. So it's about focusing on the soft skills, recognizing, do we have those kinds of opportunities in our organization that, doing a survey on an ongoing basis would be able to bring up, and also not just following the process, but living by it by testing it on a routine basis. Depending on the size of your organization, maybe the test should be every quarter or every half year, or possibly at least for a small practice once a year. Go over your policies, your procedures. How much of your people have been educated over the year? How much have you made them aware of the new things you've found out about security breaches that, if you could potentially happen to you? Don't just assume that because you're a practice, you're too small for somebody to bother. Because quite honestly, a practice that has 500 patients or a practice that has 5,000 patients are all just as much a target as a hospital that has millions of patients. The value of that information is very real to a criminal, and the street value of it is tremendous.
Wow. Well, that makes a lot of sense. So would a medical practice or a hospital be able to use the freerisksurvey.com to get started with the prevention outside of the HIPAA guidelines?
Yes, I think they would. From a hospital perspective, rather than just look at it from an enterprise-wide approach, you may want to let each department take a shot, like the head of every department, take a shot at the survey and see how it applies to their department as part of the ongoing requirements to reduce and mitigate the potential. That may be one way to do it. From a practice standpoint, absolutely. Every practice, regardless of how small or big they are, should be taking the survey at least once a year and seeing if the questions and the interpretations of the questions change over time for them, or help them alert to things they may not have thought of before in the evolution of wanting to mitigate and reduce the potential for security loss.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Esther, for taking the time to be with us here today. I appreciate your valuable information, and we'll look forward to keeping in touch.
Thank you. I appreciate you coming and talking with us.